Hi there, my friends. So we are going to take a look at the Journey Tokens Divination System by Kelly Fitzgerald from The Truth in Story. Someone who obviously needs no introduction. So I've never really done a video like this before. It's sort of it's not the kind of thing where I could do a walkthrough. So what I did do was spend a little bit of time with the tokens, and do just a little work with them and sort of talk about my experience. So for anyone who is not familiar, I can't imagine that by now you're not familiar, but Kelly from The Truth in Story, who also created the Story in Color Lenormand, has created this system, a casting system of what are essentially some tokens that you can use in various ways. And they're just sort of out of the gate, like the quality of these things are really nice. Like they've got a nice, they're not too heavy, but they're not flimsy isn't the right word. They're not insubstantial, you know, they feel like there's some like, I don't know what the word is. Like they just feel well made. They feel like quality. It doesn't feel like balsa wood or something, you know, that you would get at the craft store. Like there's clearly some real quality to these, and they're really nicely laser etched. And in the guidebook, you'll see what they are. But so there's 45 of them, I believe, and they come in this nice muslin bag. Whoops. And then inside also is a die, a D20, and you can use this in various ways, and I'll talk about how I've used it. So I'll show you some examples in a little bit, but again, it'd be sort of weird to just go through token by token. So they're really nice. The book comes as a PDF, which you can have printed through Lulu, or you can have it printed anywhere. So this is the edition that I had printed through Lulu. So it took about a week, I think, from ordering it to getting here. Not very much time. I think the book is about $3. The book costs less than the shipping. So the shipping was about $8, if I remember correctly. But I think I didn't get the basic shipping. I went up because I wanted to have the book in my hands, both to make the video, but also because I had printed on my printer the loose pages, and I just get really anxious having loose pages everywhere. Being a writer means that I constantly have paper all around me, and I never know where to put it. So a book is like a much nicer thing. So I have not had any experience with casting systems. I have not studied runes. I've never done charm casting. I did actually, my one experience that comes close to that was I did take Kelly's Ohm class. And so I ordered on Etsy these Ohm sticks. And I've used them a little bit. I think, you know, one of the things I realized recently is that I'm very much a tarot card reader. I do read Sibylla, but in terms of Kipper and Lenormand, I've not really had very much luck with them. I just find them sort of, it feels like doing algebra more than doing a reading those systems to me. And so I sometimes get anxious about systems that aren't tarot or Sibylla, because those seem to click for me in a way that other things don't. But this was a fun experience. We had a lot of fun in the class. And so I haven't done like castings with these. What I've done is like I'll draw 3, and you know, even after taking the class, like I don't have the symbols memorized, so I have to use a reference sheet. And even doing this is very mathematical for me, because I then need to sort of take the sticks and then figure out what the symbol is, and then go to my little cheat sheet, get the keywords, and then sort of normally what I end up doing is like writing the keywords out and trying to figure out a sentence that makes sense as a divination. So tarot for me is a language that really makes sense. A lot of systems have not done that. This has been lovely. I've had a good experience with the Ohms. You know, I mean, I've talked a lot about Lenormand on my channel. I have tried. I've taken 2 classes with Camilla Elias. It's just like I can get there, but it's just not a fun journey getting there. It's like a lot of fucking work. Where tarot, I lay out the cards and I know what they mean. So my experience with, this is all by way of saying that my experience with casting systems is nil. This is really my first one. So the guidebook is really, I would say, necessary even if you have some experience with runes or ohms or any other casting system charms, because what Kelly has done is create a system. So you could, if you wanted to, use your own associations for the symbols on the tokens. But I would say that the symbols on the tokens are in many, like, some of them will be really recognizable, and some of them really feel like they are a creation of this set. You know, so you'll find, for example, the symbols of air, water, fire, and earth. You'll see like north, south, east, and west. But then there are others that I think are or have been designed by Kelly or inspired by other things, and so I think you will need the guidebook as a reference in some permutation, whether or not you print it or you order the book yourself. But you do want the reference. The other reason you want the reference, of course, is to understand how the things are structured. So we'll actually probably spend a little bit more time working with the book than the tokens in this video, because the tokens are the tokens. The guidebook is sort of how you access what the meaning is. So there's some great information about casting systems, and Kelly always does her research, which I always really appreciate. And it was the same in her own class. Like, she really knew the history. She knew where these things came from. She doesn't rely on common knowledge or hearsay or just what other people have said. Like, she goes out and she reads a lot about what she's going to talk about. So she talks about the casting systems that are out there and sort of a little bit of history. She talks about her particular system, and then she talks about how to sort of work with the tokens. So one of the things that happens when you grab the tokens from the bag is you're going to get, some that are up face up, and some that are upside down with the back showing. And you could look at that as the things that show up are upright are in a natural state, and the things that show up face down are reversed or in a blocked state. And there's a little line on each symbol that indicates which is the bottom. So you can sort of indicate if you want to see something as reversed rather than having it face down, you can just make sure the line is at the top, which makes it upside down. So you have blockages and reversals and how to work with that. The only exception are the seasons, and what she says in the book is that she originally had 2 tokens for each season, because there's a front half and a back half of the season. But that was you were getting seasons maybe more than you would normally. Like, the seasons were really dominant. So what she suggests is actually with the seasons that if they show face up, then you're looking at the first half of the season, and if the season shows face down, then you're working with the energy of the second half of the season. And so there are a handful of spreads that she suggests. So there's like this hopscotch shape, and an example of this is like 4 directions to use. There's sample readings, which is really nice, so you can see how she works with them. There's this sort of honeycomb shape that works with the elemental energies. There's these I think are based on like Kipper card spreads, these like straight line garden path or airstrip spreads. And then there's this hive tableau, which you could use sort of like a big ground tableau with Lenormand. This is not something that I would probably do myself because I'm not familiar enough with the system, so to use all 45 of the tokens in one reading would take me a long time, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then she talks about casting and how you can cast, which is a little bit more like sort of throwing rather than the spreads that she talks about up to this point are, you pull the tokens and then you lay them out, and you would interpret them a little bit more formally, like a tarot spread or a card spread. Casting is you sort of grab a certain number of tokens and you toss them, as it were, onto the table. So she talks about that, and then so she talks about working with a spread cloth or a sheet. So she has worked with an Etsy artist to come up with a spreadsheet, which I did purchase as well. So this is sold separately, and on her website you'll find a link to where to get this. I honestly don't remember how much it cost, but it wasn't super expensive. So this, you could use this or not, you could make your own. Again, I wanted to have the complete thing so you could sort of see everything that she had designed. And it's nice because it does sort of feel like the line art feels very similar to the energy of the lines on the token. So it's certainly nice. So it's got the elements, the 4 directions. You have this sort of double circle or triple circle where you have sort of the middle as like spirit, for example, and then what's closer to you and what's further away. She also has these additional lines here, so you could work with this in thirds if you wanted to do it that way. So I did do some casting spreads because, again, I'd never done this before, and I knew it was going to take me some time, and it did, because basically what I had to do as a reader was do the casting, and then basically I had to work with the book, and the way that this is going to work for folks who are new is, you know, you're going to do this however you go about it, and, you know, you cast the tokens, and then, again, you decide whether you're going to work with the blocked or not. So this one came up face down, so that would be a reversal. So when I go and look in the book, I would interpret that from like a blocked standpoint. The rest of these actually all came up face up, so I would work with them in their like active or neutral state. So I would look for the symbols, and I would say, okay, in fire I've got this symbol. So I don't recognize them all, so I have to go. Luckily, in the back of the book there's a visual reference guide, so I identify this symbol, which is winter, and so it tells me that's winter. And so then I go to page 35, and I get a description of what that means contextually. So I'll get a keyword. So winter is reflect and plan. And then I get a description, and then kind of what the symbol means in a casting. So for example, the meaning of this, so I have fire in my fire life, which would be my creative life, for example, or my passions, etc. I have winter. And it shows up that when this symbol shows up in a casting, you can see the overall quality of clear, calm, reflective insight may be in play or needed. If you choose to, you can see face up as the first half. So this was face up. So it would be the first half of winter, which is time to reflect on what has been. And face down as the second half is a time to plan ahead for spring. All right, so I get a little sense of what this means. What I have been doing, and the reason why I didn't want to do the reading live on the video, well, not live, but on the recording, is because I've sort of been just like making notes as I do it, and then trying to sort of make sense of things. So this is why I did, you know, it takes time for me to sort of sit down and say, okay, so in my air field, I've got all of these. So this was a casting. I actually took pictures of the examples I did, and what I'll do when I'm done yapping here is I'll show you the pictures and kind of talk through what I came up with. But so I had to sort of look at what was in each quadrant, get the title of the token, and then some keywords, and then I have to kind of interpret that. So it's, for me, a very involved process. I did not know if I just sort of go ahead and just pull like 3, that's not super intense, right? So I just pull 3, and then I look at the meanings of each, and I come up with a thing. A casting was a bit more in depth and took more time, and really was more of a mathematical equation for me, because what I had to do was like figure out, okay, so I've got the west token, and that suggests something fixed or coming to a conclusion, a sun setting. I've got the plant token, so physical support, but it was upside down, so it's blocked. So I am doing all of this sort of like looking up the token in the back of the book, finding the keywords, writing out the thing, and then kind of spending time with the combinations and coming up with what's going on in my air area, for example. So that's what I'll show you in a little bit. So for me, it is a lot of sort of like, it's a very cerebral process. Unlike tarot for me, which is like I lay out the cards and I say, okay, this is this, this is this. So again, but this is a new system, both generally as like something that Kelly made, and it's a new, like casting in general is something that's new to me. So it's not the way my brain works naturally, so it does require that I put a little bit more time in it. Now, there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying that that's a negative. I'm just saying for me, it's like, okay, I have to think about this a little bit more mathematically than I do with systems I'm more familiar with. And because the symbols are new to me, I sort of have to, so it becomes a little bit of like bibliomancy in addition to the tokens, because I have to sort of say, all right, what is this picture? Okay, that represents the waxing moon. So I go to page 38, then I say, okay, the waxing moon is a time when energy around you is building up and things are being illuminated. So I say, okay, building energy. So I write that down, and then I look at what else is in the quadrant for that thing, and then I kind of coax out a sort of overall message, and I'll show you 2 examples that I did. I did one very generally on sort of like show me what's up with my creative life right now, and then I did another one about someone's job search, so that was for someone else. And so I'll show you those in a minute. I think that's all that I wanted to cover in terms of this. So really, really cool. Again, this is very new to me, so it's something that, like anything else, I have to learn. I'm not one of those people who can pick up a system and just do it. And there are reading this way is different than reading like an oracle deck, because even on an oracle deck you're likely going to have keywords, and there's a very sort of tactile experience here which is unusual, you know what I mean, because you're pulling the tokens out, you're casting them or laying them out, you're going into the book, you're going to your note paper to sort of do your interpretation. So for me it's a very kind of like active, engaged, there's a lot going on, so it's an interesting, very active experience. Whereas with tarot, for me, like it's probably a little more passive because I know what all the cards mean. I've been reading it for a long time, and sometimes I do have to sit down and do the math, but the math is usually easier because it's more familiar to me. I will say, something else I didn't mention was with the with the casting. What I did was I used the die that comes with it, and I said, okay, that's how many tokens I'll pull. So I rolled a 15 here, so I'd go in, shake up the bag, pull out 15, sort of shake them up in my hand, and then allow them to fall where they may. Another thing that the die is useful for is there are a couple of the last tokens, the animal, the plant, and the crystal, have a table of correspondences that she's come up with, and she's also given you space to create your own. But so if you get the animal token, for example, it's talking about animal energy that may be needed or present, and so, but how do you know which one? Well, rather than having a token for all the animal associations, you can roll. And so I got an 8, and so I would say, okay, I got an 8. The animal is fox. So the animal energy or support that might be necessary in that case is cleverness and fox energy. And the same thing for plant and crystals. So if it were the plant card and I rolled an 8, that would be about dandelions, and the crystal would be selenite. So you can use for those 3 tokens something to get more information or more specific concept of what is necessary or what is active in your life. So that is a look at the overall sort of accoutrement. What I'll do now is I'll go over and show you some pictures of 2 spreads that I did, 2 castings that I did, and how I sort of interpreted them for using the system. So I will be back with you in a second. All right, well, I went through this whole recording and discovered when I went to edit the video that it did not record my audio. So that's fun. That's fun for me. All right, let me go back and redo this. So, okay. I said all kinds of brilliant things that I did not write down in the last thing, so I'll probably make this quicker than it was. I did two demos of the tokens as a casting system because I felt like that was probably the most interesting thing about the set. And as I said in the first half of the video, I'd never really worked with anything that way before. I probably should also mention the windows open because it's kind of hot in here, so if there's background noise, I apologize. So the first thing I did was I did like a casting just about my creative life. You know, sort of show me the state of my creative life at the moment. And so I also rolled the d20 die to figure out how many tokens, so I got 6. And so here is what I did. I just sort of pulled 6 tokens out of the bag without looking, shook them up, and released them onto the spread cloth here. So this card here was way off in the distance. It actually was way off the cloth, but I put it here just so we could see it in the picture. You'll note that the line is at the top, which means that it was face down. So when the line's at the top, that means it was face down, so that energy is blocked in some way. So you'll see that here, you'll see it here, and then you'll see more in the other video. Of course, we're going to get like the trash come and make noise, right? So, can you hear that? I hope not. So here we have the overall thing, which is interesting, is that most of the tokens were concentrated here in the air area, which makes sense because I'm a very air-heady kind of person. I'm an airhead. And so the combination of the cards was really interesting. So I keep saying cards, the tokens. So we have in the air quadrant, we've got the waning moon, which is right here. And then we've got, this is disruption. And then here we've got conception, but it's upside down. So conception blocked. So I got this now this is just me. I don't know where this came from, but I got a sense of slowness. Like somehow something's waning, but the waiting is being disrupted. Like this connection was really interesting to me. So like these two feel really related because this is about shaking things up and this is about something ending. But then this is about something just like a conception, a new beginning, it's blocked. So there may be like mentally a sense of like not doing these things, not shaking them up, and that's blocking the conception. Or things are just moving really slowly. And another thing that made me think of that was here we have the east reversed or blocked. So east is like the sun coming up, it's a new day, it's a new start. So that felt really connected to these two because it was sort of like things are going on, but you're not seeing the progress fast enough, which is frustrating, and you're feeling blocked. Now that's just my own interpretation, right? Like I based that on the keywords and the guidebook. And I'll talk about this too. So this token showed up really right on the line between fire and earth. And this is like the repel card, the reflect card. So it's almost like whatever energy of fire and air comes along is really getting like repelled by this sort of like energy of air and water. So like this whole thing feels like passion and practicality both feel totally blocked. And then another thing that was interesting was that air reversed or blocked shows up in water. And so there's like a real disconnect where like even your emotions are so tied to your mental state. And again, there's like a block there. Because air and water, not totally adversarial, but definitely ill-dignified in a sense. Not completely, like not as strongly as water and fire, but there's a little bit of a conflict there. So as a reading, I think it paints a really interesting picture of someone who is like trying to break through mentally to a new space, but things aren't moving fast enough, and that's really frustrating. And any enthusiasm or even like practical sense they have is just being completely deflected by the mental state. So there needs to be some work done here to open things up and definitely to unblock really the rest of the elements. Air is definitely taking over and sort of being problematic. Now that resonates with me because I do tend to sort of live in my head. So, I one of the things I always want to know when I'm looking at a new deck or looking at a new system is the reading useful? Now, critically, I would say this is not the most useful reading, but I think that really has to do with the shitty question I asked. But I wanted to get a sense of like what it felt like to do sort of a general reading on a particular topic of creativity. And I think that the reading is actually, it's more useful than it might have been. And so I think whatever like uselessness, and it's not useless, whatever like struggle I have with the actual reading has to do more with the question I asked. And as I talk about all the time, like the question is everything. So in this example, I actually did a real question for someone who's looking for a new job. And the question was, what do I need to think about as I face this job hunt? And there was a lot of one of the things that I really like about this system and this idea of casting as opposed to laying out cards is that you really visually get a very quick hit of where things are concentrated. And you can see right out of the gate, right out of the gate again, that the energy is really concentrated up in the mind, up in the air. And then again, sort of here in Earth, you can see there's a lot of things going on. There's just something in fire, and then there's literally nothing in water. It's completely empty. Water does show up here again. This was another one that sort of fell away. I put it here at the bottom, but it sort of fell off the cloth. So water does show up, but it's like way out of the concept, way out of things. So the first thing that taught me is like this cannot be an emotional experience for you. You have to sort of leave the emotional stuff aside and focus on it very intellectually and very practically. So I like that. Right out of the gate, I sort of know emotions, not a big player here. Earth and air are definitely going to be big players. And this person, like me, tends to be very heady. So then what did I do? Let me look at my notes. So air had the most kind of going on in it. And so we have west here. And west suggests a sun setting or things coming to an end. And then we had plant here. And this was reversed or face down, as you can see. And that has to do with physical support. But again, it's upside down, so that physical support is blocked. And so that made me think, like, it's important for this person to think about this job, this current state needs to wrap up because it actually does have a physical impact on them. And so the connection between these two is like things do need to wrap up as they are because it has a physical impact. Down here we have intuition, and so that suggested to me keeping your eyes open, honestly. Being alert and being aware and like looking out for what you want, in career. Here we have serenity, which is like about calmness. So like I think that has a lot to do with avoiding anxiety. And then here we get fall, and that's a clearing away. And it's upside right, so that suggests the first half of fall. So it's like preparing for winter. So I think it suggests like a job hunt is never easy. You just have to clear things away and prepare. But the connection between west and fall I felt like was really interesting too, because again, west is like the sun setting on something, fall is clearing away. There's also a connection here with plant because again, the ending, I think the physical toll on this person makes them realize that they have to end the current state of things. Then down here in the earth section, we have conception right here, and that's blocked. And we have reception or receptivity here, and that's also blocked. And they fell just like this, obviously face down, so I flipped them over. But that tells me like there's a lot of like conception is not happening because receptivity is not happening, and that just speaks to me of like you're not going to make any steps until you take a more active approach. Now this token here fell into sort of the middle, but mostly in the Earth area, and so that card is Spark, or Self-Discovery. So interestingly, like right in the center, they're in a very sort of self-discovery phase, but it's again upside down, so that like needs to again have a more active effort. And then here is Spring. This is the second half of Spring. And with Spring, I just think about like newness and freshness, and you know, you need to like make a change again. So I feel like it connects to the stuff up here. And then down here in Fire, we have this is Child, and it's in a weird way again, like innocence, but what I sort of felt like here in Fire, the connection here is like, just be careful of being temperamental and being too impetuous. You know, don't be too childish, because in Fire, that can really lead to tantrums. So I just got that sense there. So again, that feels like a lot of kind of good advice for readings. So that felt really positive. And so I would say overall that I actually really like this system and this idea, particularly the way that you can sort of see concentrations of energy working in different parts of your life. And for two very brainy, heady people, it was interesting to me that so much showed up here in Air. It makes total sense. I think that this is really cool, honestly. It's not... I think you can do that. You can do it with tarot, certainly. You know, you can see, oh, there's a lot of Wands cards in this reading, so certainly there's like a fire element to it. But you don't when you do that, you don't necessarily see where everything else is spread. So I don't know. I think there's something sort of visually arresting about having these quadrants and sort of like these elements and just letting them fall where they may, and seeing what's most active or what needs to be most active, and where deficits are. Like, how does that work? Like the absence of water, but water still showing up here is like, you cannot get too emotional about this. You have to be very intellectual and practical about the approach. Even just that one thing shows up in Fire is like, don't be too impetuous, don't be too passionate, don't be like, be more balanced, be more grounded, be more cerebral, don't be heavy, you know, drama. I think that's really, really cool. Honestly, in terms of like I said earlier, it's an interesting thing to sort of like go to the tokens and figure out how many you're going to use and pull them out of the bag and lay them out, and then go to the book and figure out which token is which, and then make like, that's a very active experience, which is very different for me from anything else I do regularly. But I do like it. There's like an activity to it. My frustration is my own, which is like, I want to know what these symbols mean right out of the gate so that I can just sort of start talking or start interpreting. There's something to be said for me, though, for slowing down and doing something like this, or even what I mentioned I would do with the Ohms, where I have to like sit down and really sketch out my notes and understand things and make correlations and connections. That is valuable. And I think that I am a victim of wanting to do everything right away and to start talking right away. And that's not necessarily a great thing. But in the moments where I'm trying to figure things out, that's where the anxiety comes in, and I feel like I can't do it. Every time I take time and really sit with it, I'm capable of doing it, but I want to know right away. But that's actually not different from tarot either, because when I read for myself, frequently I do have to sit down, because I'll say I know what these three cards mean, what the fuck do they mean in the context of this reading, and I'll get pissed off. But then when I sit down and I say, okay, let me do the math. So I think reading for yourself generally involves doing the math. Tenacity, I talk about that in my book. So this is just a different version of that. But I really do enjoy the visual aspect of seeing how the tokens are cast, where they fall. I think that's something really interesting. Something I didn't really talk much about was kind of where on the sheet they fell. Like if you look at the west, it's really outside of the circle. So you could say, for example, that things are sunsetting, but not right now. Like it's taking some time. So you could definitely look at it that way. The closeness of these two, of like clearing away and serenity, like you have to sort of calm, so there's like a close connection there. These have a close connection. These definitely have a close connection. So you could do a lot with that too, which I have not done. And even how close it is to like another element. Like I didn't really talk about this either, but the Serenity card sits almost on the middle. And if you think about the connection here between the Child card and the Serenity, not the card, the token, there's like a connection there, because it's like, be excited, but be calm, And then this Child card being so close to the Earth line is like, be grounded and excited. So like the connection of how close it is or far away it is from something, I think can be really key, especially like here where the water card with the water token was so far away, wasn't even on the sheet. So I think this is cool. I think it's fun. I definitely think that this is something new for me, and I'm excited actually to do it, and I don't feel sort of as intimidated as I initially did after having done these two. And I did do a couple smaller ones, which I said in the video. In the first half of the video, I actually found it a lot easier to do, because it was less like this. I think that was one thing I felt initially when I first tried to do one, when I first got the tokens, was like I just did it and it was late, and there were so many, and I was like, fuck, this is so much. Like I don't have the energy to do this. But like having sat down and doing it, I think actually is really successful. So oftentimes when I get cranky, it has more to do with my own impatience than the system. But I'm happy that I did sit with this. So I think this is great. The set of tokens is $55 plus shipping. I don't remember how much the spread cloth is. And then the book you get for free, but if you want to have it printed, like I said in the first half, I think the book itself was about $3 and the shipping was about $8. So it's not a super expensive set. And the tokens are really nice. Like they feel really good. The quality and the etching is really nice. It's not line, like there's a really nice sort of calligraphy feel to the lines, which I think is really cool. So that is our look at the Journey Tokens Divination System by Kelly Fitzgerald. I hope you're well, and we'll talk soon.